Raymond Burke, an elderly black man in his late 80s, was driving a sleek, shiny old black Mercedes to his home outside New Orleans when a police car's headlights dazzled him in the rearview mirror and forced him to stop. The old man could not imagine who were the officers on board that car and what this chance encounter on a secondary road in the city would mean for everyone, especially for them. Raymond Burke was in the last stage of his life. He was aware of it and was not afraid of it. The doctors had warned him of the seriousness of his health condition and of the complications that could arise during the following months if he did not receive adequate medical treatment. "I want to leave with dignity, doctor. If my time has come, I will leave as I came. I don't want to say goodbye to this world surrounded by machines and the smell of disinfectant. I hope you understand," he said to the doctor who was treating him and insisting on hospitalizing him. Burke suffered from very advanced leukemia. Such was the severity of the disease that only morphine was able to relieve his pain and allow him to live a normal life. His back pains were becoming more and more persistent and prevented him from moving quickly. However, the old man continued to cling to life, and with his body anesthetized and full of marks from the injections, he got up every day and continued his work for the community. Raymond was a reference for the struggle for the rights of the black community throughout the country. His commitment to his fellow fighters was so great that he put their interests before his own, and being as ill as he was, he never failed to attend a single event that would help continue to create a more tolerant and just country for all. Moreover, Burke refused to share his illness with anyone, not even his family, his 40-year-old son Charlie, his greatest source of joy and pride. "The day it's my turn to leave, I'll say goodbye to him. In the meantime, I want him to keep looking at me as if there were no reason to be sad. I couldn't bear to see my son crying for me and looking at me with pity," Mr. Burke told his doctor when he recommended that he tell someone he knew about his illness to help him. And that brings us to the moment we described at the beginning of the story, when Burke, ignoring all medical advice, decided to drive alone for more than an hour to attend a meeting at the town hall of the neighboring town to resolve some urgent matters that required his approval. The old man was returning home exhausted and in severe back pain when the lights of a police car dazzled him and forced him to stop on the shoulder of the road. "Damn it! What do they want now? I was driving very slowly. I couldn't possibly have broken any rules," said indignant to himself. In fact, Burke was driving at a slow speed and with excessive caution. Given his age and physical limitations, not doing so would have been very dangerous. So the reason that led the police officers to stop him had nothing to do with driving regulations, but with his skin color. Raymond had had the misfortune of crossing paths with two of the most racist police officers the state of Louisiana has ever known, Officers Perkins and Lloyd. "Good evening, old man. What are you doing at this time of night, driving around here all alone?" asked the younger of the two agents, Tom Lloyd, in a sarcastic tone. "He must have escaped from the nursing home and is trying to escape by the road less traveled. Right, Grandpa? Are you listening to me?" shouted the other officer, much heavier and more stout-looking Officer Perkins. Raymond sighed, crestfallen in the seat of his car, and glanced at the two police officers. He gave them a haughty look, and undeterred by their shouts and insults, asked them what they needed. "Good evening, officers. What do you need from an elderly driver tonight? Have I broken any laws? It seems to me that I was driving rather slowly. Is that forbidden?" Burke asked with a certain cockiness. Raymond was used to dealing with such people. During his long career as a politician, he had had to face so many times such derogatory remarks and taunts that they no longer had any effect on him. Burke knew exactly what to do and what to say in every situation. However, that night the discussion would go beyond words, and in the physical aspect, the older man was at a distinct disadvantage. And the fact is that the agents who had ordered him to stop his vehicle were not only police officers, they were also part, albeit clandestinely and almost illegally, of several racist groups that openly and publicly manifested their hatred towards the black community, and even recorded themselves carrying out verbal and physical aggressions that they later shared through their social network accounts on the internet. Of course, the officers had made sure that their names and faces were never made public, nor were they on any official list, but their close circle of friends had long been suspicious of their unofficial activities, although no one dared to confront them or publicly accuse them. Perkins, a police officer in his late 50s with more than 20 years of experience in the force, was in charge of instructing Lloyd, a young thug with no aspirations in life, to become a policeman and later another loyal supporter of his racist club. Both had been terrorizing the citizens for years and felt they were untouchable. Mr. Burke was to be their next victim, but the night would end in a completely different way than they had imagined. "Don't get smart with me, man. We are the authority here. Do you understand?" shouted Lloyd, to whom the old man's attitude was beginning to exasperate. The sudden change of attitude on the part of the younger policeman caught Raymond by surprise, but he did not flinch. The older man continued to sit inside the vehicle with a serene attitude, looking with a calm expression at the officer who was shouting at him. "Calm down, son. You're not going to get anywhere with that attitude. People understand each other better by talking," Raymond told him in an unusually soft voice. The old man's passive attitude managed to set off the other officer. Agent Perkins walked up to Raymond's car door and yelled at him to get out of the car immediately. "Is that necessary? Can you explain to me what the problem is?" Burke asked again in a calm voice, although the old man was beginning to feel a little frightened. "I don't have to explain to you how I do my job. Get out of the car, or I'll take you into custody and spend the night sleeping in a cell. Do you understand?" he shouted again, this time much louder, and splashing saliva on the old man's face. Raymond didn't expect to have to get out of the car. He really hoped the conversation with the officers wouldn't take more than a few minutes. But things were getting difficult, and he was beginning to wonder how he was going to get rid of these two thugs, disguised as policemen, who were out to frighten people for their own amusement. He opened the door of the Mercedes and slid out very slowly. Every movement he made was a torment. The effect of the morphine he had taken before attending the meeting was wearing off. Raymond felt the pain in his back was reaching its limit and didn't know how long he could stand it without falling to the floor. Stepping out of the car, Raymond turned away from the officers as they searched the vehicle from top to bottom. "You're not going to find anything," whispered the old man under his breath. "Silence! Last warning, old man!" warned Agent Perkins with a threatening gesture while he rummaged through the trunk of the car and threw everything inside it on the floor. Agents Perkins and Lloyd were experts at conducting such searches, especially on people of color or foreign nationals. Their victims always ended up terrified and unable to confess what had been done to them for fear of the possible consequences. But that night, everything was going to be different, and the fate of the two agents was going to change from one moment to the next. When the search of the vehicle was completed, Officer Lloyd approached the elderly man with an intimidating attitude and asked him where he was going. "That's none of your business, young man. I have committed no crime. I want to go home," replied the old man without raising his voice. That answer made the young agent lose his patience, and he grabbed Raymond by the collar of his shirt and shook him. The old man looked like a rag doll in his strong arms, but he did not even move. The pain he felt all over his body was already unbearable, and he could barely stand. How dare you disobey me? You think you're better than me. I am the law, and you are nobody. Having an expensive car doesn't make you superior to me. Do you understand? Tom Lloyd shouted at him while holding him by the collar of his shirt and shaking him hard. Raymond felt like he was going to collapse and could only beg for mercy. The pain made him shudder, and his whole body began to tremble. Please, please let me go home. I just want to go home and rest, whispered the old man on the verge of fainting. However, Agent Lloyd didn't seem to notice anything, and instead of releasing him and calling for emergency help, he continued to shake his body harder, while Agent Perkins laughed out loud and applauded his partner. That's the way I like it. Begging for mercy, said Perkins with laughter. Fortunately, a couple of tourists happened to be passing by on their motorcycle at that very moment, and they stopped in their tracks when they realized what was happening. That forced Lloyd to let go of Raymond abruptly, leaving him leaning against the hood of his car, shaking and breathing heavily. Is everything all right? Asked the girl to one of the agents from the motorcycle, not daring to come any closer. They were a young couple of Asian tourists, so they were not part of the group of people worthy of respect of the couple of agents. The look of hatred that Agent Perkins gave her made the girl mute and shudder with fear in her seat. Get out of here if you don't want to be next. Go back to your own country, shouted Perkins fiercely. The motorcycle accelerated sharply and went out of sight around the corner. The distraction with the tourists allowed Raymond to recover and get back into his car, while the two police officers made sure that there were no other people in the area who could testify to what they had done. After all, the second thing these two policemen were also well known for was that they were real cowards and liars, capable of selling out anyone in order to get away with anything. Perkins decided it was time to leave and forget about the old man, who was still sitting motionless in the seat of his car and seemed to be in terrible shape. Let's get back in the car. Come on. Leave him alone. We've had enough fun for today, Tom. If the old man has a heart attack, I don't want to be here to be asked questions. It could be dangerous, he said to his companion. Lloyd hesitated for a few seconds, but finally agreed, and they both headed for the police car that was parked about 50 yards from Burke's black Mercedes. As they walked along, they commented on what had happened and laughed. They seemed really satisfied with what they had done, and their egos were sky high after having managed to humiliate a poor, defenseless old man. They thought they were the kings of New Orleans, untouchable before the law. But that was about to change. Raymond was still sitting inside his car looking straight ahead. He was breathing hard, trying to control the pain and gather his thoughts. He could still hear the pair of policemen laughing as they drove away. Every inch of his body ached, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation he had just suffered at the hands of two police officers. Police officers? What a disgrace! And to think that these men are the ones in charge of keeping us safe, muttered the old man, very angry. Raymond had never taken advantage of his contacts in the city council, nor did he want to make use of the privileged position that his son currently occupied in the national political scene. However, the situation he had just experienced called for swift and effective action, and he knew of no one better to do justice than his son, Charlie. I don't have a choice. We'll know what to do, Raymond said to himself as he pulled his cell phone out of his inside jacket pocket and searched for his son's contact. The pain was still severe but bearable. However, Burke knew that he could not return home that night without help, which would force him to confess to his son the truth about his illness. It was already becoming very difficult to dissemble, and the old man felt that his days were coming to an end, so it was useless to postpone the conversation any longer. But duty always came first, so he would not say anything to him until he was sure that the matter of the two policemen was resolved. Charlie replied to the first tone. "Dad? What's wrong? You don't usually call me at this time of day. Is everything all right?" asked his frightened son. Charlie was, among many other things, an overprotective son who had always looked out for his parents' welfare. But since the death of his mother, Amanda, the Burke's only heir had turned to caring for his father, which is why Raymond always tried not to worry him about his health problems. Raymond cleared his voice in an attempt to disguise the physical discomfort he was feeling, and quickly told him all the details of his encounter with Agents Perkins and Lloyd. Charlie's fury could be felt through the phone. "Are you all right? Have you been hurt?" he asked in alarm. "I'm fine, son. It was nothing, but I think your team should investigate the matter thoroughly. I have a bad feeling that I was not the first victim of these two men. They seem to be very used to terrorizing all those who are not to their liking." "You know what I mean, honey," he said in a deep and sad voice. Of course, Charlie knew what his father was referring to. They had both decided to go into politics for the same reason, to fight against racism and for the human rights of the black community and all citizens of the country. Burke's work went a long way, but his son's career had only just taken off and was reaching its peak. "Are they still there? Can you see them?" asked Charlie. "Affirmative. They are smoking and drinking on the side of the road. They don't look like they intend to work tonight. Furthermore, they are very modern law enforcement officers," commented Burke, looking in the rearview mirror of the car. "Don't move from there. I'll be there in less than half an hour." "I love you," said Charlie, and hung up the call. Raymond settled back in his seat and just waited while he thought of possible ways to reprimand these two men. Meanwhile, Perkins and Lloyd continued to smoke and drink, oblivious to what was about to happen and the consequences of their actions that night. The laughter between the two officers was about to end forever. Just as Charlie had assured him, in less than 20 minutes, 3 official government cars arrived at the side road where Raymond and the 2 police officers had met. Raymond sighed in relief at the sight of them, although he was a bit surprised to see the number of cars that had arrived. 2 security agents dressed entirely in black and looking intimidating got out of the first car. Raymond recognized them instantly. They were his 2 former bodyguards, but now they were serving someone else whose security was much more important. The reaction of the 2 police officers was very different. Upon realizing the cars that had just arrived were government cars, both gasped and dropped their drinks on the ground. Fear gripped their body and began to regret not getting into the car and driving away quickly. But it was too late to run away. Soon both would be severely punished for their mistreatment. Although they could not even imagine who would be in charge of giving the order. The first 2 men who got out of the car were quickly joined by a third man who got out of the second car. He was dressed in a dark blue suit and shiny black shoes, carrying a briefcase. He looked like the kind of man with whom it is best not to have problems and who always have everything under control. He was the Burke family lawyer, the best friend of the last person to get out of the last of the cars, and one of the best lawyers in the whole country, the prestigious lawyer Liam Norris. Liam was well known and often appeared on television, so the 2 policemen recognized him immediately. It was then that they began to realize the gravity of their situation. Who had they offended? Who was the man they had insulted and publicly assaulted just a few minutes before? The answer to all their questions was about to be revealed with the appearance of a very important person who would end his career in a matter of minutes. The door of the third car opened, and out stepped the last person the police officers would expect to see that night. The brand-new senator from New Orleans and Democratic presidential hopeful Charlie Burke Phillips. Seeing him walk up to them and speak to the suited man, the 2 agents' faces paled. and they understood the gravity of their actions. "Liam, can you take care of them, please? Make sure justice is served, I trust you. I'm going to check on my father," said Charlie, giving both agents a look full of contempt, and walked briskly away to his father's car. When he got to the car, his father was already waiting for him, and when he saw him leaning out of the window, his face lit up with a big smile. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of everything. Shall we go home?" "You look bad," Charlie said tenderly as he got into the car. "Thanks for coming, son. Let's go home. I have a lot of things to tell you," replied the old man in a tired voice. That night, many secrets came to light and forever changed the course of history. Raymond confessed to his son that he was gravely ill and had only a few months to live. The senator's first reaction was to be angry at his father's secrecy, but he soon understood why he had done so and promised to take care of him until the last moment. For his part, Liam granted Charlie Burke's wish and got the two officers who had insulted and humiliated his father expelled from the force with immediate effect, but not before bringing to light all the racist aggressions they had been carrying out for more than 8 years. There were more than 50 cases that Agents Lloyd and Perkins had hushed up, and which had now turned against them. That was their last night of service as officers, and their record would be forever tarnished, preventing them from prospering again, and condemning them to exile and to live in a state of permanent social marginalization. Raymond Burke died 3 months later, surrounded by his family and friends. He went peacefully and happily, knowing that he had done everything possible and necessary to make New Orleans and the world a more just place. Do you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation,